someone has an agenda to divide Syria into three parts. I'm not exactly sure who it is. I've heard that it's a collaboration between Syria, Saudi, and Turkey. But the idea is to divide Syria into three parts, similar to what it was in the Ottoman period. In the Ottoman period, in fact, during that period of time, Syria was divided up into three parts and split fairly evenly between Jordan, Saudi, and Turkey. And so there's someone out there who wants to impose that kind of situation. Well, in order to do that, they have to take out current leadership. The warring parties, which included, well, first the Syrian rebels, whoever they are, in talking with those who participated in the original revolution in Syria, they're saying that really their intent was just to bring to the attention of Assad and his government the importance and necessity of constitutional reform. Rights for women, rights for people to run for office, a more democratic form of government. And based upon the pressures that were received, Assad was giving signals to many that he was willing to make some of these changes in his government, especially as the revolution began to heat up. But what I'm told, even by those who were rebelling at the time, or at least trying to make their point clear, is that terrorists moved in and began to use violence in these protests. And the violence became more and more serious. Furthermore, the people are reporting that those who came to participate in those protests, they didn't know who they were, they don't know where they came from. In some cases, they didn't understand their language, they didn't understand their dress, they didn't feel that they were Syrians at all. But as they became involved, then the protests became violent. What I think, personally, is that these parties saw this initial protesting as an opportunity for them to use the Arab Spring movement in order to remove President Assad from office. At the time, it may have been a good idea, but without an election and without someone to take the place of President Assad, removing him from office, it was going to create a void, similar to the void that we saw in Iraq and in Libya. We see the confusion that resulted. At this point in time, if you were to take Assad out of office, it would create a void that would require someone to come in and to assume that leadership, and whoever's the leader, they would have to be recognized by everybody else there, or they're not likely to support that leadership. Or it's going to have to be somebody who can enforce their leadership. That is to say, they force them to do what they say. This is how ISIS emerged. And ISIS originally was hired and trained by the United States in order to help in the Iraqi war. They were supported by fundamentalists and extremists who wanted to support the idea that they would create an Islamic state. They basically alerted the world to that fact, saying that we believe that not only the Middle East should be an Islamic state, but the entire world should be an Islamic state, and that was their agenda. And they began launching terrorist activities not only against Syria, but against everybody else. We saw what happened in Spain, we saw what happened in France, we saw what happened in England, in the United States with 9/11. We saw what happened in other countries, Indonesia and Africa, etc., and the list continues to grow. And as their agenda becomes more and more intense, and extremists are gathering their followers using a religious agenda, saying that somehow that violence is part of their religion, and that it is used in order for them to gain control and to force people to follow their leadership. And it's all for monetary gain. These people are not religious. Even the Grand Mufti of Syria, who has been approached several times by ISIS leaders and asked to leave the country and allow them to support this terrorist activity and to take over the leadership of the country, promising him that he would receive a a mansion for 50 or more of his family members, that they would be able to go there in safety. The Syrian Grand Mufti resisted ISIS, and in his resistance they decided to take the life of his eldest son. He was leaving the Damascus University, and as he came out of the door, 15 armed men with machine guns jumped out and they killed him. After burying him, they stole his body, the body of the Grand Mufti's son, and to this day the family, including the Grand Mufti, does not know where the body is.